Glad to
Hey
see you.
there. This is Gabby Allen. Thank you so much for coming out to Out on a Limb with Gabby Allen. Today, I have the absolute pleasure to be hosting Joel Burcat. And we are going to be talking all kinds of book stuff. If you can see, he's got an amazing poster behind him, which I'm so jealous of. I want a poster like that. I think we're going to have to figure out where he got it. And he's got books. I love this. I love this. I have bobbleheads and pop vinyl behind me. Joel is set up, and that is a beautiful thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to start like we always do, and we're just going to jump right in and say, hello, Joel, and tell us what is it that you do and how do you do it?
Hi, Gabby. It's great to be on your show, and looking forward to talking with you, whether it's for a half hour or an hour or 2 hours, till people finally start just falling over. So what do I do? What is it that I do? I write, and I practiced law for nearly 40 years.
Oh,
And I actually started writing, I'm going to say, 15 years ago or so in my spare
okay.
time. Usually late at night, I would write. And actually had a medical condition that required me to stop working as a lawyer
Oh,
about 2.5 years ago. We can
okay.
talk about that sometime. But in any event, as a result of that, I had to take early retirement.
Mm.
And since then, I spend my day writing. And I write basically all morning long. And then in the afternoons, I get involved in something that I'm sure you just love to do, which is the business of books. So all writers know that as much as we love to write, there, unless you're Tom, unless you're I don't know,
Tom Clancy.
Not Tom Clancy, but Lee Child
Oh,
or
yes.
James Patterson or somebody, and you have people to do that kind of stuff for you. The rest of us have to devote our time as the small businessmen that we are doing
Yes.
the business of books. But what I love to do is write. And I've been writing a lot of different books, and I've had two published and a third one on its way in a few months. So I'm
Awesome.
happy to talk to you about them.
That is fantastic. So yeah, I don't have people. I don't. It's really funny. I think about that sometimes and I'm like, what would I even give somebody to do? Because as much as I'm like not a huge control freak, I I really can't think of anything that I would be like, here, I don't know, make Facebook posts or the Twitter me. Like I don't really know what I would do about that because I'm so used to taking care of myself. It's very interesting because I did start out super small publisher and now I'm with Kensington, but I still do super small publishing. Plus I'm doing self-publishing. But even with Kensington, they're like, here's your back cover. And I'm like, oh, all right. Well, I had already written that because I always have, or they'll say, oh, we have this schedule of events for you to do. And I'm like, oh, well, let me send you my huge spreadsheet because
Right.
I want to make sure we're not like double dipping. I'm just so not used to doing things on my own. I mean, I'm so used to doing things on my own that I struggle with that sometimes. So your publisher is who?
I'm published by Headline Books out of
Oh,
West Virginia.
very
And
cool.
we have a number of friends, I think mutual friends, Don Heelan in particular,
Yes.
who's published by Headline.
Okay.
And, they're an independent press, the sort of an oxymoron. They're a large, small press. So
Okay.
there's a small number of people working over there, but they publish a lot of writers. I think they have well over 100 writers and well over a couple of
Awesome.
hundred titles, but they're technically in the business. They'd be known as a small press compared to, Random House or Simon
Right.
Schuster and those companies.
The big
Um,
five.
and they have, they published my first two books, Drink to Every Beast and A Mid-Rage. I've been told to say those names as often as I possibly can. And A
Right.
Mid-Rage is now out as an audio book too. I was supposed to
Oh,
do that a few times.
oh my gosh. How
But
cool is that? Did you
yeah,
get to pick the narrator or
I did, and that was fun too because they were very different selections, and I picked one. I'm very, very delighted with it, and it's
oh,
very happy to have that out now, and that's fun, and I get a lot of good feedback about that because there are a lot of people who, for a variety of reasons, prefer an audible book, and
right.
either they're driving long distances or they like to listen to an audible book when they're doing housework or whatever,
Yeah.
and so it was fun to do, and I'm glad that I can serve that audience as well.
it is nice to have options. I know when I first started with a small publisher, they weren't ebook only, they were ebook first. And
Right.
so like they would do the ebook, and then the way they wanted to do it was that it was ebook first, and if that did well, they would print book. They ended up changing that, but I did work with other presses, or have friends that worked with other presses that did that. And sometimes it was very hand tying, because, if your book is long enough to publish as a print book, there are still people who love print books. I mean, like, I'm not taking my Kindle to the beach.
Right.
I don't want sand in it. And I like the smell of books. I like the feel of books, but I do love like ebooks also, because you can have 1,000 with you, and if one is not speaking to you at the moment, you can switch right over to the next one. And so, like, do you find that you're having more audience reach now that you have audio available?
It's a great question, and I should know any day now, because I'm getting my statistics and my royalty check that comes in January and July. So
okay.
So ask me again in about 2 weeks, and I'll know for sure.
Well, we're hoping for you. We're hoping for you. That's awesome. So your first book, tell me what the name is again.
The first book is called Drink to Every Beast. And both of those books, both Drink to Every Beast and the Mid-Range, and my third book, which is coming out later this year, called Strange Fire, they are environmental legal thrillers. So think John Grisham. Think The Appeal, Gray's Mountain, The Pelican Brief.
Yeah.
In that genre of books.
Okay.
And I have a background. I practiced as an environmental lawyer for nearly 40 years. And so I know a thing or two about environmental issues. And I thought, I'm going to marry this interest that I have with environmental issues with the thrillers that I love to read. I love reading legal thrillers, and I love reading thrillers. And I thought if I could marry these two things together, that'd be great. And so I've created a main character, as I know you have for your series as well. So my guy is named Mike Jacobs. And Mike is a young environmental prosecutor working for a mythical agency called the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection.
Okay.
And it's modeled, of course, after the real DEP. But Mike is he's a young guy, and especially in book number 1 and Drink to Every Beast, he makes a lot of mistakes both as a lawyer and as a human being. And he grows, of course, during the course of that book. And in a Mid-Range, the second book, he's already 28 years old. So he's now much more senior than he was a year or two earlier in the first book. And so he's making fewer mistakes. He's a better lawyer. He's a really good lawyer, actually. By the time we get to the third book, Strange Fire, he's already at 29. He's already a senior lawyer at Pennsylvania DEP, which is the way things work over there. Awesome. And in terms of his working as a human being, he's getting better. And by that, all of that human being stuff, I mean, he has a lot of romantic issues in Beast. By the second one, he's working on those issues. By book number 3, he seems to be getting those issues together. Let's put it that way. So I have a lot of subplots in my book, and I really believe in subplots. I know there's some writers, they stay away from subplots. They just they have a story. They want the story to start here. They want it to end there. And I believe that, what really makes a reader want to turn the page are the subplots, so long as the subplots marry in tightly with the book itself, with the main plot, and of course,
absolutely. Well, and I was talking to somebody last week, and the thing is that for me, like, I will read nearly any kind of book if you keep me interested in the characters. And as much as I love plots, and I love the intrigue, and I love the thriller aspect, and I love this is getting scary and now I can't put it down, I still want to root for somebody. I still want to be able to watch. Like, I love then that in the first book, he is not perfect and he is growing, because I like to watch people grow, and that is what I am invested in. I enjoy oh no, now I'm never gonna remember his name. I can't remember. I'll think of it later. But there's a detective in the hills of California, and is it Harlan Coben maybe that
It
has
could be Harlan Coben's books.
I think
Or maybe Michael Connolly has guys out in California,
it
and
might be him. I also used to read John Sanford. Um, it was his Detective Davenport, I think. But like, I love watching people. This is gonna sound horrible, but I love watching people stumble because none of us survives this life without stumbling, and watching them be able to go through things and rooting for them to be able to go through those things. And then the romantic plot. So when we were talking off camera, you had kind of said that you're thinking about doing some romantic suspense. And so are you going to change your name because it's different enough from what you're doing that you kind of want to let the reader know that it's not what you're currently writing, or how are you going to do that?
well, I'm still working that out, and I have an agent now, and we're still working
Oh,
that out as well.
very
But
cool.
my after writing three Mike Jacobs books, and I actually have a fourth one kind of sketched out.
Mm-hmm.
But after writing three of those books, I decided to write a few other things. And the book that I wrote that is the romantic suspense is called Temperature Rising, and
Ooh.
it's set a couple of dozen years ago in 1988. And it's about a young woman, 21 years old, a law student at Rutgers, who goes down to Washington, D.C. to go to a job interview at EPA. And on the way
Okay.
to her interview, she's going to pick up a videotape about energy issues. She goes to the
Oh,
Energy Institute and she says,
okay.
I'm here for the videotape. And the brand new receptionist says, oh, that's down the hall. Just go into that room. She goes into the room and sits down because there's a videotape playing, but she walks into a room full of lobbyists.
Oh,
Lobbyists are plotting how to stop all research on climate change. And she
oh.
realizes after about 5 minutes, I'm in the wrong place. But then she feels awkward about just sort of getting up and leaving. So she stays and listens to the whole thing. And then
Uh-huh.
and they're plotting and they're planning on how they're going to pay off senators and congressmen and how they're going to try to draft this legislation and get it through that's going to stop any kind of research. And she's heard a lot of stuff. And so
Right.
at the end of the meeting, of course, she's probably the youngest and most attractive person in the room.
Uh-huh.
And these two lobbyists see her there and they zero in on her. And they invite her to come back to the next meeting, which is going to take place next week. So she leaves the meeting and goes back after her job interview. She goes back to Camden and she's talking to her friends and she's talking to her professor. And they say, you've got to go back. And she said, I don't want to go back. I don't have anything to do with those people. And they say, no, you've got to go back because, you've got to get the truth out. And the
Right.
professor gets her in touch with a New York Times reporter he sees Pulitzer Prize all over this. And
Right.
so he wants her to go back. Everybody wants her to go back. She goes back, and of course, she has to fall in love with one of the lobbyists,
As you
which of
do.
course makes her life so much more difficult because she
Uh-huh.
wants to do the right thing. She really wants to expose this nefarious conduct. It's the stuff that they're
Right.
doing. But on the other hand, she realizes that if she does it, the guy's name is Coy Young. He's
Oh,
from Texas. That
okay.
if she does this, she's going to destroy Coy Young, who she's starting to fall in love with.
Yeah.
And so when I started writing the book, I really, honestly, I didn't intend to write a romantic suspense.
Uh-huh.
And the more I wrote, I thought, I think this is becoming a romantic suspense. It was sort of the characters were leading me in a certain direction.
Yeah.
And you know this as well, because what happens is when you write a book, you have in your mind, I'm going to write this book and my characters are going to take me here. And then the characters say, no, we're taking you over here. And then we're going to go over here. And then we're going to zig back over here.
Yes.
And it's almost not you talking anymore. It's like
Right.
the characters are telling you where to go, not the other way around. And you wake up at 3 o'clock. I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And the character's been whispering in my ear for like an hour with
Mm-hmm.
their dialogue. This
Yeah.
is where we're going, Joel. This is where we're going, Joel. And
Yeah.
so Anna Freeman, the protagonist in that story, is whispering in my ear, and Coy Young is whispering in my other ear.
Uh-huh.
And so I had only read a couple of romances, and so I made a point of reading a few romantic suspense books. And one that I
Good.
really, really liked was Verity by Colleen Hoover. Uh,
Okay.
and that really spoke to me. And I thought, wow, this is neat. I can do this. So
Absolutely.
I've written the book now, and I won't tell you how it ends, but
Okay.
it,
Yeah. Don't ruin it for me.
but it's I'm very happy with it, and it still needs some
Awesome.
work. It still needs some work, but
They always do. They always do. So do you feel sometimes, and this is just my take on it, do you feel sometimes like you're taking dictation once you get
yes,
into yeah.
yes, and
What?
people who don't write don't always get that,
Yeah.
because there are times, and it happens to me at odd times, like
Hmm.
middle of the night, I'll wake
Yeah.
up and I have a book.
You have to.
I've got a book
Uh,
right here. And
yes.
I keep it by the side of my bed, this book here.
Yes.
And you can always tell when I'm writing in the middle of the night, because I try to write with no lights on to so I don't wake up my wife. And it always looks, I've
Right.
learned over the years that if I do that, then the next morning I may not be able to read my own writing.
Right.
So I
Right.
sometimes I'll go into the bathroom and turn on the bathroom light, and I'll stand there and I'll write. And
Right.
then sometimes I'll come here to my writing room, and I'll just, come up here at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'll just start writing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I myself have like a little notebook next to my bed, and sometimes I'm like, so during the day, I'm a document specialist for long-term acute care hospitals. And I deal a lot with doctors' handwriting, which is just scribbles. And so I look at my own stuff and I'm like, what are you channeling a doctor? Like, I need to be able to read this. I don't even know what that word is. I don't think it exists.
I'll
But
have to send you my notes sometime from the middle of
oh,
the night when I'm writing in the dark.
I
I've done
would
that
love
already.
to see them. I would love to see them. So will you continue? So you said you have book 4 with Mike Jacobs. Are you going to keep, like, what do you think that you'll do both genres in tandem, or do you feel like you're going to kind of close off Mike and then move into romantic suspense?
Well, I like doing a lot of different things.
Hmm.
So I've also written mostly now um, I guess you'd call it, it's not science fiction, it's really more speculative fiction. I've
Oh,
written a
okay.
speculative fiction book, and actually I started it probably about 4 or 5 years ago,
Hmm.
and I worked on it, and I got it to a certain point, and I was pretty happy with it. And then I got back to my Mike Jacobs books, and I was working on that. And so I put that aside. That story is about, imagine this story, a fictional
Okay.
story
Yes.
about a township police department going to war with the FBI.
Oh,
Set,
now that's
set,
cool.
set a few years in the future.
Okay.
And you had mentioned before we got on, you had mentioned 1984. The
Yes.
book was actually, to prepare for that book, I read a number of other things, including 1984, that I hadn't
Hmm.
read in a few years. And I read a number of other books about national security, and about the stuff that we use for national security.
Yeah.
And so when you start reading that stuff, it blows your mind, because you don't realize how much stuff there is that
Yeah.
exists today, that is this technology, which is just unbelievable in terms of how often we're recorded, how often we drive down the
Right.
street, and people,
Yeah.
these cars driving down the street, collecting all the license plate numbers, and
Uh,
all
uh,
that other kind of stuff.
even like Google Earth or MapQuest,
Right.
like they have cars that are specifically like their designation is to drive around and make sure that like any detours are on the map, and that they're not sending people to roads that are no longer open and stuff like that. So you have somebody like driving around and just watching everything. And it's very interesting to think about. Is that something that is in your speculative fiction, but not necessarily in your legal stuff?
It's not as much in the legal stuff, but I only wrote the one book, which is called Little Brother,
Oh,
and
as opposed to
my
Big Brother.
as opposed to Big Brother.
Yes.
And there are a lot of parallels to 1984 throughout that story.
Okay.
My main character in that story is a female police detective sergeant named
Okay.
Bernie Baker. And Bernie you would like this, because she's a very, very flawed character.
I love flawed characters.
She is a single mom. She has the 15-year-old daughter from hell.
Okay, as you
And
do.
really from hell. I mean, anything I could think of, I would come up with about this daughter, and then I said, okay, what can I do that's even worse than that? And also figuring that this is set for about 15 years in the future. So,
Okay.
people are doing things now, and I'm thinking, well, what might they be doing in 15 years?
Right.
How about mom comes home one day from work and she has facial tattoos. The daughter has facial tattoos, like completely covering her face, along with all of her buddies who do the same, and stuff like that. And the language that comes out of the daughter's mouth would turn a longshoreman's face red, that kind of stuff. And Bernie's not like that. Bernie has her problems too, because like I said, Bernie's a single mom, and Bernie has a little secret. I'm not giving away because you learn about this very early in the story.
You don't want to ruin it.
But she's an intravenous drug user in addition to everything else that she does.
Okay.
And so she's got a lot of darkness in her life. And by the way, not legitimately, but to justify it, I mean, she has a bullet lodged next to her spine, and she's constantly in pain, which caused her to start using drugs.
Right.
But she's smart, and so. Actually, one of my daughters helped me to name the antagonist in the story. The antagonist is an FBI agent, and his name is Dick Smith. And I don't know about you. When I'm writing a book,
yes,
and you're just like, you're busy, you're getting this stuff down.
Yes.
It's like I'll sometimes name a character Smith, and then the next one is Jones, and the next one is Brown. Right. It's just
it happens.
Just placeholders.
Right.
And eventually they're going to whisper in your ear, or they're going to say to you, "Hey, Joel, my name isn't Smith. My name is something else.
Right.
My name is Baker, or whatever."
Right.
All right. So I had Smith, and I think I was calling him Richard Smith, and I showed it to one of my daughters. My daughters are in their mid-30s, and I said, "Yeah, I'm going to call him Richard or something like that." "No, Dad, his name ought to be Dick." Because he's a dick. Okay. So he's Dick Smith.
There you go.
He's the head FBI agent, and he's a bad man.
Yes.
And
you have to have them.
He's surrounded by bad people.
Okay.
And but the thing that I tried to do in that story is just imagine if every device that you owned, whether it's your cell phone or whether it's your laptop or whatever, is constantly recording you, kind of like in 1984.
Yeah.
And all that stuff is going into this humongous FBI facility in West Virginia, which they have, by the way.
Yes.
And it's just or NSA facility, and they're constantly sorting through that stuff.
Right.
And especially if you're on a watch list, they're constantly sorting through that stuff to see what are you up to.
Yeah.
And so that's what Bernie has to try to work around, is the fact that in addition to believing that the FBI are really bad, because what this one guy, Dick Smith, did was to kill a teenager in cold blood.
Oh.
And she's trying to get to the bottom of that crime.
Right.
And he is, and the FBI are pushing back on that.
Okay.
So I mean, it's there's a lot of. I really love that story. I love and it's a very, very dark story. There is some romance in it, but it's not a romantic story at all. But there's some elements of romance in it, and a number of subplots that are relevant to the story. And I'm really happy with that story. And but I am shortening that up a little bit and tightening that up right now. So I'm in the process of editing that one. And then because I like to
because you're not doing enough already.
Well, I wrote a young adult thriller. Oh, so I'd never written one before.
Had we talked about that when we were doing
yes, we did.
Okay.
I'll tell you why we talked about it.
Yes.
Because I needed some words that were not 4-letter words.
That's right. I remember.
You sent me a list of cuss words that were not words.
Because I'm the one to ask.
So the book, you know John McGoran?
I do not.
Okay, John's a good writer. I like him a lot. He's written some neat stuff. He writes a lot of science fiction thrillers.
Oh, okay.
And other books as well. And when the pandemic began, I had this idea of a what if thing. Mm-hmm. And I talked to John, and he was the one who convinced me to write it as a young adult thriller.
Okay.
Because originally I wasn't going to write it as a young adult thriller. And so again, I went back and I did my research and I read about half a dozen young adult thrillers, and was sort of blown away because, you know, I think the Hardy Boys was, you know, what I thought was like a young adult kind of book. And it was,
not
you know,
so much
back in the day.
right, not
50
so much
years
now
ago.
though.
No, not at all. And I was really shocked. I was shocked at the level of violence. I was shocked at the level of sex, and I was shocked at the level of cuss words. But in any event, you know, trying to kind of walk the line, because you don't want to go too far and have it be the kind of book that, you know, school librarians are going to say to a kid, "Now you can't read this," or moms are going to say, "You can't read this book." So you have to walk the line in that. But in any event, so I wrote a post-pandemic young adult thriller. That one's done, and that one's actually being shopped around right now by my agent.
Okay.
Just really, really briefly in that story, I have posited that it's 5 years after a pandemic that kills all of the adults. And we don't know why that the adults die, but there's something about this pandemic that kills you once you reach puberty.
Interesting.
So anybody over the age of puberty is dead.
Wow.
These kids are living in neighborhoods, and they've sort of blockaded their neighborhoods off. So a bunch of kids in one neighborhood are like living, you know, it's kind of a cross between The Road and oh gosh, what's that great book we all read in high school? It'll come to me. Anyway,
that's all right. As soon as it comes to you, you can just yell it out.
yeah, I will. But the, you know, these kids are living in these neighborhoods, and they're constantly having wars with each other because they need stuff. They don't have enough food. You know, they have some water, but they really don't have enough food.
Right.
And a Lord of the Flies. So so this story is kind of a young adult version of Lord of the Flies meets The Road.
Okay. I can see that. Now that's very interesting. And again, then, so if you do a young adult and you're doing romantic suspense and you're doing speculative fiction and you're doing environmental thrillers, do you feel like there's enough crossover in the stories that you're telling that you can keep your name for all of them? Or are you going to try to like separate them out?
I've thought about it a lot. I like my name.
I like your name too.
And I think that possibly for the romantic suspense, I may change it up a bit.
Okay.
My initials are JR, and I was thinking I might call myself by my initials, JR Burcat, for the romantic.
I could see that. I could see that. Yeah, that would make sense.
So,
are your thrillers appropriate for a young adult who wants to read up? Do you think?
Yes.
Okay.
There's sex in my books.
Okay.
There's violence in my books. I now know, having done a study of violent young adult books,
that's not as taboo as you thought it was originally. Okay.
Once you read about a half a dozen current and top-selling, best-selling young adult thrillers, you realize that violence is sometimes more violent in young adult books than it is in adult literature. I found.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I mean, it's, I know from things that I have read previously myself, that like kids like to read above their age. So, you know, if you're 13, you don't necessarily want to read about 12-year-olds. You want to read 17. You'll be reading 20s. You might not read the 30s. It would kind of depend on like what the story itself was about. But there are a lot of younger people who really enjoy reading things that, you know, as a parent, you might think, isn't that older than what you would have liked? And yet I think about myself, and I mean, I was reading romance at 12 years old. So I didn't understand everything I was reading, but I was fascinated by older books. I wasn't necessarily, and I loved Nancy Drew, but I loved Nancy Drew like until I was about 13, and then I loved her again in my later 20s. But that middle part, I wanted to read about people who were older than me. That's when I was reading like Clive Cussler and
All right.
John Sanford and Dean Koontz and that kind of thing. And none of those people were really teenagers. They were all adults going through adult things. And even if I didn't quite get what all they were doing, I still felt more connected to that than trying to read down like into the 12, 10, 12, 13 area. So I feel like you could get away with it. And obviously that's something that you would talk over with your agent and stuff. But so do you know which, so they're shopping your YA, you said?
Yes, they are shopping it right now.
Okay. And they're not shopping the romance yet, the romantic suspense yet?
That she just got that, and it's too. She's only just had it for.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
for anybody who's listening that doesn't understand the terms that we're using, because maybe you aren't into this area, shopping means that you have an agent. That agent then goes to any number of publishers. They can do exclusive submissions, which is where an editor has asked for something specific, and that agent says, oh wait, I have something from Joel because I don't, he wrote this and I think it's exactly what you want. Then you can also go wide, and that would be a different going wide from selling. This is going wide with agents. That would be where they're sending the project out to a number of places at the same time, which sometimes you get an auction. And when you get an auction, they start throwing money at it because everybody wants it. And that's what we're going to hope for you.
right,
And
from your lips to God's ears.
yeah, exactly. I'll talk about it to him tonight. But so Joel, what Joel is saying is that the agent has it and she is sending it out. She or he is sending it out to any number of different publishing houses, asking if this is something that they would be interested in seeing. Now, are you submitting on proposal? So is she sending out 3 chapters in the synopsis, or is she sending out the whole thing?
She's sending out the whole thing.
Okay.
And she has a number of editors at these different publishing houses that she's familiar with, and she's communicating with them. In some instances, she knows a number of different editors in the same publishing house. And she told me that depending upon how things go, she might go to one after the other. She would not go to the same publishing house, 2 different editors at the same time.
Right.
But but it's very exciting right now, and I'm waiting to see what happens, and that's an exciting thing. And so I mean, right now, I mean, I've been busy. I don't write as much as you do, but I write a lot, and I am trying to write in different genres.
Okay.
So, like I said, I did the YA book. I've done the romantic suspense. I've done 3 environmental legal thrillers.
That's awesome.
And it's there's a bunch of different things that I'm working on because I'm sort of interested in a lot of things. I mean, the book that I'm really happy with, my speculative fiction. I mean, that's
wonderful.
And I'm really excited about it. And it was just funny because without making any political statements, over the last 4 years, the idea of a township police department going to war with the FBI kind of became more of a possibility. And so I speculate as to how that kind of thing could happen. And they really do go to war. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on between them.
That is fantastic. Now I'm gonna ask you a question, and this is something that used to be, it's not necessarily anymore, but there for a while there, because of publishing schedules, they would ask you, once one of your genres really took off. So let's say that people really like the Mike Jacobs stuff. They like your romantic suspense, but your young adult just like soars off the chart. Could you see yourself maybe focusing more on the young adult, or do you feel like you get more pleasure out of working on a series of genres because it keeps the writing fresh for you?
Honestly, with every book that I've written, almost as soon as I'm done, I'm sure you find this too, when you say the end, when you type in the end,
Yeah,
you know, your brain is still working.
I love those words.
And those characters come back to you and they say,
Uh-huh.
they knock on your brain door and they
Yeah.
say, hey, we're not done. There's still other stuff that I want to do.
Yeah.
And so I will, in every instance, I've written at least one, if not more, chapters of the next book.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I mean, so there is, even though I've finished 3 Mike Jacobs books, there is a 4th one that I started.
Yeah.
The same with all of these books, that there's yet another book that I've written, or at least started writing, I should say,
Right.
a chapter or 2 that I've written. So I do know that it wouldn't be that difficult for me to continue writing about these characters, because it's you know, it's sort of like, imagine a waiting room, a big waiting room, and all of the characters you've ever written about.
Oh,
They're all sitting there in that waiting room, and it's like they're looking around and they're looking at their watches and they're saying, come on, Gabby, let's get going here. You know,
when is my time?
I've been sitting around now for about a year or 2, and I'm ready to do something. And so they're sitting, and then finally you look at them and you say, okay, you, come here. And then you know, they jump up and they get real excited, and they jump back into your mind, and you start working on that again. So it's an exciting thing when that, you know, especially once you start developing characters.
Oh yeah.
And then I've got a couple of other characters I don't know yet what to do with. I mean, I've got a guy that I really love. His name is Bobby Beck.
Okay.
He's an environmental lawyer, but he's sort of a really edgy environmental lawyer.
Oh.
And he's covered in tattoos.
Okay.
And if he hadn't been an environmental lawyer, then he would have been a very successful lead guitarist for rock.
Oh. Okay.
And
I love it.
And that's Bobby Beck. And he's very different than Mike Jacobs, because Mike Jacobs he's sort of a nice guy and a normal guy and sort of an everyman. That's Mike Jacobs. Mike has no superpowers, and that's something I tell people all the time, is that Mike is not a Jack Reacher, for example, who's 6'5".
Right.
He's not like other characters who have,
something,
whatever it might be. He doesn't know karate. He doesn't have a black belt. Any of that stuff.
He's not Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal, who can beat anyone and anything, no matter what.
I wanted Mike to be very relatable, and that people would say, "Oh, I could see myself doing that." I didn't want him doing anything that was so over the top that people would say, "Oh, well, you have to be 6'5" and Jack Reacher to be able to do that kind of thing." Yeah. And I just wanted him to be relatable.
Okay.
And but I developed this new character that I really like, and I just haven't figured out how to use him yet. Bobby Beck is he's kind of like, when he walks into a room, people notice, because he's that kind of a guy. And he's not overly full of himself, but he's a little full of himself. And he's got a big personality. And so I've tried writing for him a little bit. I haven't quite figured out what to do with him. But he's not going to work for a state agency. He's going to be in private practice. And he might be the kind of guy that you go to when the state agency can't help you, when EPA can't help you, and he's that kind of a go-to environmental lawyer. I'm thinking that's where that story's going to be.
I like that idea a lot, and that's that is the beauty of the beauty of being a writer is being able to play with different characteristics, play with different characters, play with different lifestyles and different backgrounds, and where someone came from and what that means for them as a character. And I like your idea of the waiting room, because it does sometimes feel like that. Now, I personally have ended certain series, and even if Ivy is still waiting in the waiting room, she'll have to sit there for a little while, because I kind of sent her home, because for me, after 6 books, she had gone through all the things that I wanted her to go through. She had come out on top. She I don't want to ruin it for anybody who might actually want to read those for the very first time, but she had hit the end of her journey and the beginning of another one that I wasn't going to write. And so I also did that with Adventures in Ghost Sitting, which is she owns a junkyard, and everything in the junkyard has a ghost attached to it, and they're all very badly behaved. And I love them. And she's very into the 80s. So all of the titles have to do with 80s stuff, like Desperately Seeking Salvage, Don't Dream It's Rover, I Wear My Ghost Goggles at Night. But she also was done with her journey. And so I finished it off. But there are, like, especially in cozy mystery, and as we talked about, like John Sanford earlier, I don't even know how many books Lucas Davenport is in. It's a lot. James
Right.
Patterson has Alex Cross. He's in a lot of books. And so I feel like certain genres can lend themselves. Cozy mystery is another one. I think Donna Andrews is like in the 20s on her books. Janet Ivanovich is in the 20s. Certain books lend themselves to being really long series, whereas I have not gotten into a series yet where I have felt like I could see myself doing 40 of these. You know what I mean? So do
Right.
you see yourself as somebody who, as long as the characters are talking to you, you could keep going? Or are you more of a, I'm thinking from what we've talked about so far that you're not necessarily a planner from the very first book, like, okay, I have Mike Jacobs, I have 6 books that I want to do on him, and then I'm done. You're more of a, I've done 1. Oh, look, I could do 2. Oh, look, I do like 3. Oh, there's an idea for 4. And you'll just keep on going until you don't have any more.
I knew that I was going to write at least 3 books in the Mike Jacobs series, and
Okay.
and as you know, that's a long-term commitment to do that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't. I mean, I knew it was going to take a few years to do that.
Right.
And I think you said it really well a few moments ago when you said that one of your characters had completed her journey.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is. You have to decide, has he completed his journey? I mean,
Right.
obviously he's in Strange Fire. He's 29 years old. So it's not like he's ready to retire and go off and live in a commune someplace.
Right.
I mean, he's a young guy, and there could be a lot
Right.
more stuff with him. But at least
Absolutely.
if a particular journey is done, that's a natural place to stop a series.
Mhm.
You might pick them up later on. I remember not too long ago, I attended a program, a Zoom program, maybe 6 or 8 months ago, and
Uh-huh.
John Grisham was the person that they were interviewing when he came out with one of his new books.
Okay.
And the interviewer said to him, John, you write and your stories always seem fresh. Your characters always seem fresh.
Yes.
Why is it? How is it that you manage to keep your characters fresh? And he said, because with rare exception, he said, I rarely write the same character in more than one book. He said, I have a couple of books that are series, like literally 2 or 3 books in a series. But of the 25 or so books that he's written, he's always writing about a brand new character.
Yeah.
And he said, so that way, it's never as though you're treading over old ground.
Right.
A new book. He said, you're always coming up with new stuff for a new character, and characters are as unique as people are. And so
Right.
as a result, he understands why his books do seem fresh, because
Okay.
it's always a new character. So the real challenge, I mean, Reacher's a great example. I mean, he's been in 25 books, at least
Yeah.
30. I don't know, I've lost track. Right? And
Yeah.
how do you change? I don't think Jack Reacher has really changed a whole lot over the years. I mean, he might have a cell phone now that he's never had, 25 years ago. But he's do you read any Daniel Silva, his thrillers?
I have, yes.
So he's got a character named Gabriel Alone, and Gabriel is, in fact, I don't know that Silva has written any other standalone books.
Right.
He's written at least 20 or 25 of these books in the Gabriel Alone series. And what he's done, which is interesting, he started out with Gabriel Alone when he was in his 20s or early 30s, and now he's in his 60s. And so you sort of followed his entire life in this story. And now, he's not an old man, but he's not the young kid that he was at the beginning of the series.
Yes.
And obviously we know from our own individual lives that we're different every day. We're different every year. And if you look at yourself today, you say, boy, I'm not the wild and crazy guy I was back in the early 20s.
Right.
I'm a different kind of person today than I was back then. If you were writing me as a character, I would be a different character today writing about me at my age now than if you're writing about me at my age 25.
Right. And that's, I mean, I think that you know, some people enjoy going on that journey. Some people like you know, they want to be there for the progression. They are very invested in that person. And I think some of that sometimes comes into what your series is about and whether or not it is a series. So for John Grisham, a lot of the books that I've read from him, they're naturally set up as one character because like you've kind of topped out what they could do in that first book. You know, like the Pelican Brief, I don't know how many cases can you have like that. Whereas if you're looking at like Clive Cussler, Dirk Pitt is always doing something different. He also is not like huge on the growth of character, at least from the ones that I had read. But I enjoyed those for like the action adventure part of it. And so I think it kind of depends on like how you see your character. And then again, you know, if you're writing a thriller, like unless you have somebody like who is a lawyer that's involved in that kind of thriller stuff, I don't know that you could have like a cleaning lady like Tally from the Tally Graver mystery. She's a cleaning lady. I have a way of keeping her involved in like cozy mysteries, but I couldn't imagine putting her like in a thriller.
Right.
And then continuously putting her like this poor girl. How many times are you going to have her like tied up in a warehouse on a pentagram or something? Like you can't necessarily. So I feel like part of that hinges on the kind of character that you've put into what kind of story that then dictates how long are we going to go with this. And because for one thing, with like certain, especially with the cozy mystery genre, you're asking your reader to suspend disbelief. Like how many people really are the ones solving their crimes instead of, you know, the cops doing the thing that they're supposed to do with, you know, mysteries. You are asking for a certain suspension of disbelief. Thrillers, there can be a certain suspension of disbelief depending on how you've written it. But you know, if you're like working with a SEAL team and you know they're going out to do a specific mission, that's not necessarily suspension of disbelief in the same way. So they could go on 7 different missions and I would probably be along for that, as opposed to, you know, the guy like the mechanic that I love down here is always, you know, working with the same kind of mission. I can't see being able to read that and thinking that has any like basis of reality. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, do you ever read any James Lee Burke?
I have not. I have some. I just have not. Oh, okay. All right. Hold on. Let me get a pen. I'm gonna write that down.
James Lee Burke is
Okay.
one of the great thriller writers, and I'll tell you why. He writes differently than most other thriller writers. His thrillers approach literary proportions unlike any other thriller writer.
Okay.
And he has a character named Dave Robichaux.
Okay.
And Robichaux is a cop in New Orleans. He's a detective in New Orleans.
I love New Orleans.
And, you know, I don't know if Burke has written other books without Dave Robichaux, but,
okay.
You know, like Gabriel Alone, you know, Dave Robichaux, you know, we've seen him go from a young cop to an older cop, you know, and everyone else around him now is retired. You know, he's already deep into his 50s.
Yeah.
Most of the other cops, maybe he's even 60 at this point.
Okay.
One of Burke's recent books, and you know, he's aging, and the stuff that he did, he can't do anymore. And you know, he was very attractive to women at one point. He has this attraction, but it's a different kind of attraction. It's not an animal magnetism anymore. It's you know, it's you know, and he's still troubled, but he's just life is just worn on him, and he's seen a lot of dead people, and he's been involved in a lot of crime. crime, dealing with crime, and
Right.
he's just seen a lot of bad stuff happen. And so if you read those books from beginning to end, you see how he's really changed, like Gabriel Alone
Mm,
in the Daniel Silva series. But
interesting.
Burke is just such a great, he's just such a great writer. He describes Louisiana as no one else can. I do understand, by the way, you ought to keep this in mind as a writer from Mechanicsburg who writes about
Okay.
that there are people who go on James Lee Burke tours of Louisiana because he writes with
Oh,
such authority about Louisiana, and he writes
okay.
about these places, and he writes about roadside bars, and he writes about
Ah,
bordellos, and he writes about shacks and shanties, and he writes about these little towns,
yes.
and there are actually people actually go on James Lee Burke tours of
Oh,
Louisiana. So you could
that's
do the same
fun.
thing in Mechanicsburg.
You know what? It's really funny that you say that because I want to say it might be the mystery bookstore here in Mechanicsburg who had talked about doing something like that. And I was like, that's I don't know if we could that's but then I got an email from a man who's taking care of his elderly father who is declining. And I guess when they had both read the Tallygraver mysteries, and when his dad is having a bad day, they actually drive around to all the places that I've
Really?
mentioned in Tally because it helps him, because those are things that he remembers right now. And so it makes him feel better. And I was like, okay, maybe that's not as out of the question as I thought it was. And then there's a podcast, the Dark and Stormy Book Club. They're a lot of fun. And they actually came out and had breakfast with me at Diener's on Main Street, and then wanted to take the walking tour of like where the funeral home is, where Gina lives. And I was like, so like, you really want to do that? And she was like, I totally want to see where things are. And I was like, oh, I'll take
Well,
it.
that raises a question then, Gabby. Do you change up places? I mean, they're not spitting images? I
Oh,
imagine.
no, no. No, no. I mean, so like in the Tallygraver mystery series, the funeral home is pretty spot on. There, the funeral home has, the downstairs. You can actually have a funeral in the carport, which is like a tunnel, depending on what the weather's like. They did just buy the building next door for, I think it's called the Gathering Place now, that you can then have like a luncheon there. Gina's store across the street is across the street. It is a cafe downstairs. There are living quarters upstairs. But that's where I start playing with stuff
Right.
is, exactly how does that work and what does it do? And I don't ask what anybody's hours are. I just give you the hours that are convenient to me. And yeah, so I definitely, like, I talk about the mirror houses, which if you've ever been in Mechanicsburg and you're going down Main Street, there are two brick, I want to say they're 3 or 4 stories, beautiful, beautiful Victorian homes. And if you look at them straight on, they are the exact mirror of each other. So like the front doors are both here, and then the house builds out like this, and it has the exact same windows and the exact same roof line, and everything is the same, but they're just flipped. And so I do talk about some things, but sometimes I'll move them around. The hardware store, I gave an extra floor and a different set of things. I kind of, that's why I never actually call it Mechanicsburg in the books, because
Right.
I don't want to get nailed for not doing it right. But yeah, I definitely base it on it, but I don't stick true to exactly what it is, because I don't want to call it like Eccles Drugstore, which is down here on Main Street, which is the coffee house for Gina. It's been a couple different things. It's been owned by different people. Some people keep the apothecary stuff. Some people send it away. It was in Gone Girl. No, it was in Girl Interrupted. They filmed a scene with Winona Ryder in the town. And so some people play that on a loop. Some people don't. Some people serve coffee. Some people do ice cream. So I didn't want to nail myself
Right.
into exactly what is here when I'm writing. But the flavor is definitely there. So
Well, I mean,
I love them.
but the thing is, we're writing fiction.
Yes.
We're not writing travelogues. We're not
Yes.
writing maps, and
Right.
we're writing fiction. And so, if we want to have a street be one way in the opposite direction because it serves our story better,
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen. And
Exactly.
hopefully, your readers aren't saying, "Well, I don't understand. I'm supposed to be a right turn here, but I can only go left." I mean, it's just it's just sort of hey, folks, it's fiction.
And you get like this angry email from a reader. I tried to do a tour with your book and I got a ticket because I was going the wrong way on a road. I'll tell you what, if anybody ever does that and you honest, I will pay for your ticket. I will absolutely just send it to me. I'll write a check because at that point you are enough of a fan. I would totally be willing to pay for your ticket.
That's I'm gonna have to just go out and do that just for the heck of it.
Oh, come on, Joel. All right, anybody but Joel, I'll pay for your ticket.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Oh my gosh, I have just realized that we've been on for almost an hour now, so we probably better wrap it a little bit. I did want to ask, so where can people find you, and do you have something new that we can pre-order at all?
You can certainly find me on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. And
Okay.
my book is available both as an ebook and as both of my books, ebooks and paperback.
Okay.
Mid-Range is also an Audible book, so you can
Yes.
get that wherever Audible books are sold.
Okay.
Right, and it's also available in some bookstores. So it's available, for example, at Cupboard Maker. It's available at Midtown Scholar in the Harrisburg area.
Awesome.
There are other bookstores too. I was really pleasantly surprised to see that my book of Mid-Range is available at the Harvard Bookstore. And
Well, that's awesome.
I was really surprised. I was sort of, every now and again you're taking a little break from whatever you're doing, and I was sort of Googling my book to see what was going on, and
Yes.
I saw Harvard Bookstore, and I saw that they were listing my book as available there. So you can get it at the Harvard Bookstore, and
Okay.
I'm sure there are other bookstores where you can get it too, in addition to the Harvard Bookstore. So
That's so cool.
the nice thing is if you go to Midtown Scholar, they have autographed books.
Oh, awesome.
And you can also get it directly from my publisher, which is Headline Books. They will sell books, and
Okay.
so those are the different places where you can get my book. And right now, we're doing the finishing touches on Strange Fire, which will be the next one out, and that will be coming out hopefully no later than November of 2021.
Okay, awesome.
So, that's not quite at the point yet where you can pre-order it.
Okay.
If you haven't read Drink to Every Beast and A Mid-Range, I would suggest that you get a hold of those books and read them, and although these books are also written very intentionally as standalone books. I did not want to write a book that somebody would say, gee, I'm not getting half this book because a lot of stuff happened. So I wrote it carefully as a standalone, and Strange Fire also is a standalone too. So I've done it that way.
I will say that I find, because people will ask me about Tally in the same way. Well, can I read them out of order? And I'm like, look, you can, and you will totally understand what's going on. However, you will get a better feel for the world if you start at book one. And for mine, which are funny, I'm like, and you're going to get the inside jokes better if you start with one, because then you'll like see the progression. But I do like that, if you happen to pick up a Mid-Range that first, because that's the one you see on the shelf, that you're not going to be lost and feel like you should have read book one first. Crap, what am I doing? But you should definitely buy book 1 and 2 and then get ready for 3, because that's how we like readers to go. And so do you have a website at all, or are you more like Amazon page?
No, I have a website, joelburcat.com. And it's a really cool website, good website with a lot of interesting stuff on it. You can get a hold of me through my website.
Awesome.
And I also am on Facebook at Joel Burcat Author.
Okay.
And I try to post stuff up there. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, although honestly, I don't tweet or Instagram as often as I should, but I do put up stuff pretty often on Facebook and So I'm in social media, and I'll also have a newsletter that comes out
Oh,
about once a month. So
okay.
if you're interested in that, the easiest way to get that is simply to go onto my website, and then there are several places where you can click on it, and that will sign you up for my newsletter. And
Awesome.
I put a lot of stuff in there. I've been doing a lot of interesting things. In addition to podcasts like this one, I've done a number of radio programs,
Oh,
and I've done one television show. I
that's
have to say I
cool.
didn't really know this, but I was on the Young Turks about 2 weeks ago, and they are apparently like a news outlet that a lot of people under the age of 40 are very familiar with. And the reason I know that is because my kids are pretty blasé about what it is that dad's doing. But I mean, they're interested. And
Always.
they're glad that I'm staying busy and that kind of stuff. But when I mentioned to my daughter, one of my daughters, that I was going to be on the Young Turks, she said, "Really? You're going to be on the Young Turks?" And I said, "Well, they needed an old guy on the Young Turks." So so when you get my newsletter, there are places where you can click to access the programs that I did
Oh, very
on those
cool.
different things. And
I love it.
I'm actually doing my first international interview. I'll be interviewed in by a radio station in Toronto, Canada next week. So I'm busy that way too. It's,
That's awesome. Good
as
for you.
there's the writing stuff, and then there's all the other stuff that we have to do as writers to
Yes.
promote our books and make sure that people are aware of us and know that
Yes.
that our books are out there, and
Yeah.
that they're exciting and fun, and especially with my books, I try to make my books so that people learn something, and learn it in a way that is enjoyable to learn without getting beat over the head with perspective. I mean, I have characters in my stories who are very, very opinionated about various things,
Uh-huh.
but I leave it up to my readers, and I let my readers try to figure out for themselves what they believe is the right thing.
Makes sense. Totally makes sense. I am so excited. Thank you so much for being here today. This has been an absolute and total blast. I am like really excited to go and grab your books. And I have a mid-range. So I'm gonna have to go back and get the other one, and I'm gonna get the third, and we're just gonna roll. And I will definitely, if you when not if when you sell the next one, we'll definitely come back and talk if you are available to, if you're not inundated with international interviews and everybody wanting you on Young Turks. I'd be happy to have you here back at our humble abode.
And I'd be delighted to be back with you
Awesome.
again, Gabby.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joel. And this has then been Out on a Limb with Gabby Allen. Thank you so much for joining us. And seriously, go out and look up Joel and get onto his newsletter and see what kind of fun things you can do. And I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you again, Joel, for being here. This was wonderful.
Thanks. It was great. My pleasure. A lot of fun.
Awesome.